Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate your participation on this beautiful morning. My name is Katie Earle, and I'm the coordinator of the University Express program, and I work for the Erie County Department of Senior Services. And we're joined here virtually today with Rhonda Hoffman. She'll be our instructor. Before we get into her presentation, we'll just go over a few things because we do have some new people here with us today. First thing I'll let you know, what you just heard is we are recording this session, and I will try to post it on our website in the near future if all goes as planned. Second thing for those new people here today is what you've already noticed, I'm sure, is that you've joined without your video showing and you're muted and can do nothing about that. Not because you've done anything wrong, those are just the settings for our program today. And you also might think you're the only person here with Rhonda and I, but I promise you there are a bunch of other people. It's just that we're in an anonymous participation mode, so only Rhonda and I can see everybody who's in here. So throughout Rhonda's presentation, if you have any questions or comments, please put those in your Q&A panel, and we'll try to cover as many as we can at the end of her presentation. When you think of something, type it in, click send it to myself, please, and we'll go from there. If you join from a laptop or a computer, chances are your Q&A panel popped up on the right side of your screen when you joined. You may just have to expand it. You'll see the text box, and then you can click send. If you're not seeing that, if you look at the lower right-hand side of your WebEx screen, you might see a little half circle with a question mark in a box that says Q&A. Click on that. That'll expand it. And if you join from a tablet or smartphone today, you might just have to poke or touch your screen. That'll bring up your control panel, and then you'll see Q&A if you click on those three dots. So there, we hope you participate and have some fun with us here today. So I'd like to thank the sponsors of our program. It's my Department of Senior Services, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Western New York, Excelsior Orthopedics, and Wegmans for all they do to make this program happen. And as always, please do not hesitate to contact us at Senior Services if you have questions about programs, services, benefits, you name it, for yourself or a loved one. We'll be happy to help however we can. We're at 858-8526. I'll introduce Rhonda to you now. Rhonda Hoffman has been a genealogy librarian for 18 years and currently serves as the genealogy specialist for the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library System. She has a Master of Library Science degree from the University of Buffalo and a Bachelor of Arts in History from SUNY Geneseo. Rhonda has been researching her own genealogy for over 2 decades and previously owned a part-time genealogy research business. Rhonda is the editor of the Western New York Genealogical Society's Journal and volunteers for Search Angels, which is a nonprofit organization that helps reunite adoptees with their birth families by using DNA testing and traditional genealogy research. Rhonda, thank you for being here today. It's all yours.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for coming today. So our topic today is finding your female ancestors. First of all, I wanted to point out that there will be a handout for this class that provides all of the main points in this presentation and where to find the records mentioned, and all of the websites mentioned. You'll get the URLs for those in the handout. Then I wanted to mention a few databases that I'll be referencing throughout the presentation. The first is Ancestry Library Edition. This is a database available to you if you have a Buffalo and Erie County Public Library card. Normally, it actually is only available in library at every one of our locations, but due to the pandemic, the company is let you use it from home through December 31st at least, and it may be renewed afterwards if things are still closed. So this is almost the same thing as Ancestry.com, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. It's a huge genealogy database. It has all different types of records, from census records to military records to immigration records, all types of records in here. The next is Heritage Quest Online. This is always available from home to you with your Buffalo and Erie County Public Library card. It includes the U.S. federal census records, many city directories, some military records, thousands of family history books and local history books. And those two databases you can get to through the library's website. If you go to www.buffalolib.org and click on Research and Resources, and then you'll see a link to databases A to Z. The website will ask you to put your library card number in, and then you'll have access to those databases. The other site that I'll mention a lot through the presentation is Family Search. It's www.familysearch.org. It's a free website. It's the website of the Latter-day Saints. They do genealogy research pertaining to their religion, and they have scanned millions and millions of records for all over the world for genealogy research. And most of the records you can get to from home for free, but some of them you have to go to a family history affiliate library, and the Grosvenor Room is a family history affiliate library. So you can get access to extra records through the library. So next I'll get into the presentation. So why is it so challenging to research women? Women didn't have many rights in the past, especially married women. She lost her identity when she got married. Women were supposed to be seen and not heard. Women were the caregivers and nurturers, not the breadwinners, and therefore were usually not on many legal records. Often we see women listed under her husband's name, like Mrs. John Smith. Sometimes we don't even see her given name. It was in 1848 when women were allowed to keep property they held at the time of her marriage instead of it going to her husband. And in 1849, married women could have purchased and sold her own property as if she were single. If you want to learn about different laws, state by state, pertaining to women, this is a really great book. We have it at the library. It's called The Hidden Half of the Family by Christina Schaefer. It is available in the Grosvenor Room, and it's a really nice summary, state by state, of laws pertaining to women and their rights. A great modern resource to use for women is called the Social Security Claims Index. It's in Ancestry Library Edition, and you can search for a woman by her name, and it usually gives her parents' names. Here on the slide here, we see Frances Therese Daly and her father Elmer Daly and her mother Mary Schultz. So there you've got her mother's maiden name listed there. Also, you'll see name changes. Often people are in this database because they did a name change. So we see her as Frances Daly, and then Frances Daly Crawley with an A, and then Frances Crowley with an O. So since her father's last name is Daly, Crawley was probably a maiden, or a married name. So you've got multiple names there for her. Obituaries are an excellent source for finding close family members to the deceased. They often define relationships, provide towns of residence, and provide spouses' names. So you want to look for obituaries of the women that you're researching, her husband, her parents, siblings, children, in-laws, meaning her husband's parents and siblings, and even grandparents might be helpful. When you're looking through obituaries, be sure to dissect every detail and follow up on the clues that are given in the obituary. I found a couple. These are from the Fairport Herald Mail from 1962. I found a couple of obituaries side by side that I thought were great examples. So the first one is for a Mrs. Elizabeth Bugh, and it gives some great detail, like where is her home address, her date of death, that she's a Webster, New York native, that she's a lifelong member of the Evangelical United Brethren Church. So now you know where to look for church records about her. They used the Lott's funeral home. Maybe the funeral home has records. And she was buried at the Webster Rural Cemetery. Looking in more detail, it lists, you can see it lists her daughters, Mrs. Lewis, and it gives her first name Julie Hyman of Penfield. So now we know who her daughter married. And then we've got two of her sisters listed. So we've got a Mrs. Lena Foley and then a Miss Anna Rosenbaum. And this obituary did not list Elizabeth's maiden name, which often obituaries do, but with her sister listed as a Miss instead of a Mrs., there is a clue that Rosenbaum could be her maiden name. The next obituary is Letty Bortle, and we have some of the same information that we saw before, her home address, her date of death, where she was born, the church that she was involved in, the funeral home, the cemetery. But if we look more closely, it says she leaves her husband Eugene, you've got her husband's there, and it lists a stepmother, Mrs. George Bullman of Fairport. So that's a clue. Her stepmother's last name is Bullman. So this could be her father's name, George Bullman, therefore her maiden name, Bullman. It also lists that she has 2 half-sisters, so that's a great definition of relationship. And it lists that she has 6 half-brothers, all with the last name Ellsworth. So that could be an indicator, since we've got the stepmother's name, that the half-brothers may be her mother boys from her mother's second marriage. So maybe we've learned her mother's surname from a second marriage, Ellsworth. There are many different websites that have newspaper content, and this is going to be on your handout. There's so many that I can't go over them all today. I will mention a major one for the Western New York area, which is fultonhistory.com. It's www.fultonhistory.com. It has many Buffalo area newspapers going up to 1970. And another great one is newyorkhistoricnewspapers.org. It does have some full-text Buffalo area newspapers, a lot from, say, the mid-1800s, and then there are some more recent Courier Express. I believe it goes from 1977 into 1982 for the Courier Express. So if you're looking for something more modern for Buffalo, it's a good one to look at.
Hey, Rhonda?
Yes.
Oh, if I can, will you just adjust your screen, please? Because we're kind of losing your face with your name. So if you just tilt it maybe down a little bit, then we'll be able to see you.
Is this good?
Just a little bit more, please. There we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to mention is that Heritage Quest Online and Ancestry Library Edition have an obituary index in it. And what these obituaries are from is from a database called newspapers.com. It's a subscription database from ancestry.com. It's something you have to pay for. The Buffalo content is available if you are a Buffalo History Museum member. They do have access to this in their library, or it's something you can subscribe to, but it has many Buffalo newspapers up until around 1924. And this database indexes obituaries. So you'll see a lot of the content from the obituaries, like the date of death and burial and the birthplace, whatever is mentioned in the obituary. A lot of those facts will be put in here, including children's names, all of the relative siblings, other people mentioned in the obituary. You can't actually see the obituary yourself, but it will give you the citation. So if you don't want to subscribe to this database, the library has numerous newspapers on microfilm for Buffalo. So you could come to the library and use our microfilm. Of course, besides obituaries, a great source for women are marriage and engagement announcements. If you didn't know her maiden name, here's a way you could search for her husband and find her maiden name this way. You can also find the names of her parents this way. Ancestry also has a marriage index from newspapers.com. This is a new index, and I suspect it's still being developed. I kind of call it a baby database right now. I have newspapers.com, and I've done some searching for some of the marriage announcements for my family, and I haven't come up with a lot of them. I do think they're still developing this database, so look for more content in the future, but you can search it and it'll give you the same type of information that obituary database gave you, different names that are listed in the marriage announcement, important dates. The library has digital collections. We've scanned some of our resources and put it online for free. So if you go to our website and then click on Research and Resources, you'll see digital projects. And here, it shows the home screen to our digital collections. The thing that I want to mention to you is something, it has an unusual title. It's called The Why of This Book. And what it is it's a index to very early Buffalo newspapers. It includes marriage announcements. So to the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a lot of transcribed newspaper marriage announcements. And you can see the dates in the margin. These are from like 1810s, 1820s. So we're going back very early here. Library staff did this to help genealogists who were seeking their early Buffalo ancestors. To the left-hand side of the page, it's interesting. Over time, if they found other types of notices in newspapers, like maybe deaths or births, they would transcribe that other information on the left-hand side. So the top entry pertains to the people on the right-hand side of the page. So sometimes you'll see one of those, the married couple, maybe they died or one of their children died, or it's like a birth announcement for one of their children, or even a marriage announcement for one of their children. So it's more than just marriage announcements, but it's mostly marriage announcements. When you go to our website and look at this, in the back of this book, there is an index to the marriage announcements. So that's how you can find your person. And here are some more entries. There weren't that many newspapers around Western New York for this very early time frame. So you're going to see people not just from Buffalo, but for all over Western New York. So we see like someone from Clarence, someone from Canandaigua, Batavia, Pomfret, someone from Genesee County. So it's all over Western New York that you'll see in here. And you also really want to mind the social columns when you're searching on the online newspaper websites. Search for your ancestor's name and look at all of those little entries that you see in the social column. This example here, I was researching a woman named Gertrude, and I saw all of a sudden that her husband had a new wife in different newspaper articles that I found. And so I thought, oh, she must have passed away. And I looked for her children. She had 2 daughters. I looked for their marriage announcements, and their father and his new wife was listed, but I couldn't find the mom listed in these marriage announcements. So I looked for a death in the New York State Death Index. I could not find a death for her, and I thought, well, maybe she's remarried. I looked for a marriage record for her for New York State, and I couldn't find her, and I just kept searching and searching newspapers, and eventually I found this tiny little social column entry, and it says, Edward A. Downey has returned to his home after spending the weekend in Rochester as the guest of Miss Jessie Eberts, who is Gertrude's daughter, at the home of her mother, Mrs. Fred Geen, and it gives her address. So this is the only way that I found what happened to Gertrude. This was her new husband's name, Fred Geen. And once I found that, I could track her for the rest of her life. So sometimes when you're looking through these newspaper websites, you see all these little cute entries, like someone baked something for a charity or something like that, and you're like, oh, it's cute, but it's not that interesting. But keep looking through all of those. This one, I stayed up a really late night looking through all of those little entries, and then I finally found Gertrude that way. There are these historical articles. A lot of times newspapers would post these called runaway wives. So if a woman left her husband, oftentimes the husband would put a notice in the newspaper that the wife has deserted his bed and board, and then the husband refuses to pay any bills contracted by her. So if you know a couple separated, this could give you a clue as to when that happened. This you'll see in the 1800s into the early 1900s. Sometimes they're just those brief entries, but sometimes you'll see like a more scandalous article. Like this one is more lengthy, and it says, this wife supposedly ran away with this man named Frank Harlow, but it gives some really good detail in it Harlow and Mrs. Lewis Ketzman, the wife of the proprietor of the hotel at Perth Center, and the daughter of Charles Heckert of Amsterdam. So there we've got her father's name and likely her maiden name there. Look for notices related to probate or estate records in newspapers. Oftentimes the executor of the estate had to find all of the heirs. So there would be a notice in the newspaper listing the various heirs and wanting them to come forward. And this one is an extreme example. There's tons and tons of names listed here. And the reason why there's so many people listed is because this gentleman who died did not leave children. So there are lots of nephews and nieces and siblings listed here. Then you want to actually look for wills and estate records. And this is pertaining to that same estate. And what's great about this is if you lost someone, or, you don't know what happened to a woman, she probably got married and moved away. It lists all of the heirs and where they live. Oftentimes it will also list a relationship to the deceased, which is really helpful. So, look at all of these. I'm just clicking through many screens of people that were listed in this estate, and it gives that great location information. And then in another part of the estate records, it lists that he had a sister, Rebecca, who removed to the state of Iowa. And the executor of the estate couldn't find the names of the children or their father, except for one child, Ezra Cook. So if you knew the name of this child, then you've got his mother's name, Rebecca, and her maiden name, because this is a male, this is her brother whose estate this is. And keep in mind that women did have estates, starting in the 1850s, you're going to see for New York, you're going to see women with estate files. So this is an example for a Mary Murphy. It lists a son, Dennis Corcoran. And so that could be a previous married name. So maybe she was married to Corcoran and then she married a Murphy. And then down towards the bottom, it lists two of her brothers, Edward Hartnett and John Hartnett. So there could be her maiden name unless they're half siblings. And it also lists one of her brothers there. It lists a specific place in Ireland where he's from, Lizarda, County Cork in Ireland. So you've got a possible foreign place of birth for Mary Murphy too. You're going to, if you know a woman's maiden name, it's a really good idea to look for probate records, so wills and estate papers, for anyone with that surname that you think could be the age to be her parents, and then see if she's listed in those files. FamilySearch.org has many New York State probate records online for free. They're not keyword searchable. You have to browse them page by page, but there is a scanned index that you can browse to get the information you need to look at the estate papers. Erie County estate papers are in here. There's an index in here for Erie County that goes from 1800 up to 1929, and you can browse the actual estate files up until about the year 1800. Otherwise, you would have to go to the Erie County Surrogate Court Records Office at Erie County Hall to view those. When you're looking at census records for the federal government, those are available from 1790 through 1940 right now for genealogy research. There's a 72-year waiting period before we get access to census records because of privacy. So in the year 2022, we'll have 1950 available for research. Census records are in Ancestry and also in Heritage Quest, but you want to look at everyone who's listed in your ancestor's household. Here we have a Root family, Lyman Root, his wife Julia, and their children. Listed with them is a Thomas Armstead, and he's listed as a boarder. But this is really, with further research, I found out that this Thomas Armstead is Julia's brother. So now we have his maiden name. So even if the relationship isn't specified, if it says boarder, that could still be a relative. you want to look around who's nearby too. Who lives nearby your ancestor? In this example, I underlined someone named Ram Best, and this gentleman is 21 in 1880. This is the 1880 census. And the next door neighbors have a daughter named Margaret, and she's 2 years old. And this Margaret actually ends up being his third wife later on. So, you know, look around and start researching people that live nearby, because, I mean, these are small towns. They didn't have the technology that we have today. You know, they didn't meet people like we do today. And, you know, they often met people in their neighborhood and got married to those folks. In this example, there's a G.W. Fancher family with, he has a wife named Callista. They have a son, Charles. And next door, we see a William Sartwell, and Charles actually ends up marrying William's granddaughter. Also, Callista, I've starred some things here. I've starred Callista. I've starred a Squire Livermore and an E.W. Livermore, and Livermore ends up being Callista's maiden name, and those two gentlemen are her brothers. Another thing that people do is, you know, go through census records for the town that the woman you're researching live in and identify heads of households. And then look for the probate records, the estate files, for males old enough to be the father of someone's wife. So you may find a daughter with the correct married surname that way. Just start looking through estate files and see if you've got her with her married surname that you know if you don't know her maiden name. New York State took extra censuses from 1825 up until 1925. So these are in addition to U.S. federal census records. From 1855 through 1875, those are every 10 years, they included some great detail. One thing is that U.S. federal censuses for this time frame do not list relationship to the head of household until 1880, but these earlier New York censuses do. So maybe you see a family like, here's an Oscar Smith, and there's a lady who's 71 years old listed with him. Her name is Jane Smith. Oscar is 27, and you think, oh, that could be his mother. And these censuses state that it is his mother. So, you know, also living with him, there's a brother, there's a sister. So, you know, it really defines those relationships for you for these years. Another great thing that these censuses have is if your person was born in New York State, it lists the county that they were born in. And this is really great because this is an early time frame, you know, 1855 through 1875. So you could have someone born in the 1700s and you didn't know where they came from. And this will give you a county to look in for the state of New York. The 1855 census, it lists some marriage and death information. New York State didn't start keeping marriage records until 1881. So this is 1855. These are a little bit strange. To the left of the screen, there are marriages, and then I made a red dotted line down the middle, and to the right is information on deaths. These do not name the individuals who were married or died, but you do get some information about them. Like for the marriages, you've got the ages of the marital couple and whether they were single or widowed before this marriage that took place. The marriages that are listed here happened 1 year before the census date. So within the exact 1 year before the census date. So if the census date was June 1st, then these would have taken place June 1st, 1854 through May 31st, 1855. And what it also lists is the place of marriage. So say you think your couple got married around this time frame and the ages line up with your people. If you are having trouble finding like a church marriage record or a justice of peace record, maybe they got married outside of the area. So this is from Chautauqua County, this listing, And there's a few places outside of Chautauqua County listed here, like someone got married in Buffalo, someone got married in Cattaraugus County, another person got married in Omar, which is in northern New York. So now you have places to look for a marriage record. And to the right, there's death information. It lists the person's age and their gender, their color, whether they were, their marital status, and it lists a cause of death. So if you know your ancestor died around this time frame and the age, and it even lists where they were from. So it usually is the state or a county in New York where they're from. If that lines up, maybe you've got a clue this could be your person. In 1865, there are some additional inquiries related to, there's going to be some antiquated terminology in these old census records. So it's listed here, people who, it says deaf, dumb, blind, insane, and idiotic. So if someone fell into those categories, you can see what it says, what kind of infirmity they have, and someone listed here is listed as idiotic, and it lists how many years that they've had that condition, and it says 24 years, and then it says the cause, and it says by falling from her mother's arms. And while it doesn't name her list here, it does list the page and line number that you can find her on. So you can go back to this page 75, line 41, and then look for that person. And I put her at the bottom here. Her name is Mary Elizabeth Smith. She's 25 years old. So you know that she had this trauma in her life. The 1865 and 1875 censuses, these are mixed in with the New York State censuses, usually at the end of a ward or election district. These are marriages that actually name the people who are getting married. So you've got their names, you've got their ages, you've got their marital status, so whether they were widowed or whether they were divorced or single at the time they got married. And what's great on this listing is for the women, if they were widowed, it puts their maiden name in parentheses. So we see Elizabeth and then in parentheses Manging and then Sweeney. So Sweeney was her first marriage name, or the name she was getting married under. And then it's got her maiden name in parentheses. And there's a few examples in this list. It's got their ages, it's got the month of marriage, and then it's got the city or town they were married in, so that could be helpful. It also lists the type of marriage. So if it was by a clergyman, you've got the denomination. So you see RC for Roman Catholic, you see Protestant Episcopal. So if you didn't know the religion, now you've got some clues to religion. Or it might be a civil marriage, so you can find that out too. In 1865 and 1875, there are deaths. The individuals are named in these deaths. It lists the month and the cause of death, where the person was born. It'll either be a foreign country or a state usually. So there you could find an early death. And these two are 1 year, deaths that occurred 1 year before the census date. The U.S. federal census did take mortality schedules too. So for 1850, 1860, and 1870, there are these separate schedules. If someone died the exact year before the census date, so within the year before the census date, they would be named, their age, their place of birth, the month of death, the cause of death. And this one, I found it kind of gave some interesting remarks at the bottom of the page. One of the listings is for a Mary Geithner, and it says she was killed from a falling wall. But then down at the bottom, it says she was killed by falling walls of the New York Central Railroad elevator. So we learned a little more detail there. There are also agricultural schedules taken for those state censuses that we've been talking about, and also for the federal censuses from 1850 through 1880. Women were listed in these schedules too. Often it's a widow that you will see in these schedules. And these list information about the land that they hold. So usually it's acreage, how much is improved land, the types of crops they grew, the type of livestock they had, that type of information. So you'll learn some details about that person's life. These censuses I've been talking about can be found in Ancestry Library Edition. For the state censuses, I recommend going to the card catalog and just putting in New York Census, and you'll find them. For the federal censuses, if you go to the home page in Ancestry Library Edition, down towards the bottom right, you'll see census records, and you can click on a certain year, or if you click all, then you'll see a list of all the censuses. So one of those is the mortality schedules. Another, where you'll find those agricultural schedules, they're listed as non-population schedules, and you can keyword search those. Divorces. Up until 1847, the Chancery Court could grant divorces for adultery. They could also grant divorces for separation, or they can also grant separations and annulments. From 1847, it's the New York Supreme Court would grant divorces. Every county has one. Up until 1967, the only grounds for divorce in New York State was adultery. Divorce for other reasons required an act of the state legislature, which was very uncommon. Usually the plaintiff was granted the right to remarry after the divorce, and the adulterer was usually restricted from being married again, but they often did remarry in another state. A couple could have sought a divorce from another state or another country. Reno, Nevada was very popular in the 20th century, or Mexico. And sometimes you'll see that couples may have just separated without legal proceedings. You generally will get divorce records from the Erie County Clerk's Office if you're in Erie County, or whatever county clerk's office your ancestors lived in for New York State. Sometimes I've found that older records aren't kept permanently. I tried to get some divorce records from the 1860s, and they didn't have them anymore. Divorce records are closed for 100 years in New York State. You can obtain a certificate of dissolution from the clerk's office, which would provide the names, date, and type of dissolution, whether it's a divorce, annulment, or separation. You may also find a newspaper announcement related to a divorce. Vital records are great sources for women. Marriage records will list the parents' names. Keep in mind that a woman's surname when she's getting married could be a prior married name if she was a widow or divorced instead of her maiden name. Here it spells that out. We see a Kate Louisa Smith, but it lists her maiden name as Summer. So you want to, not all of the records may not do that. So you want to pay attention to the parents' names. And these are, marriage records are great because you'll usually see a mother's maiden name listed here. The library carries Erie County marriage records from 1877 through 1935 on microfilm. Ancestry has a great New York County marriage records database. It mainly covers 1907 through 1936. When you're looking at these records, I recommend browsing and look at the counties that are included in this database, because Erie County is not included. There's a few other counties that are not included, but there are many Western New York counties listed here. You can keyword search these records and find the actual marriage records online. Birth records. The library carries Buffalo birth records on microfilm from 1878 through 1913. There's no index to them, unfortunately, but they're roughly in order by date. These are great because they will list the mother's maiden name and where she was born. Something to also look for is it usually lists how many children the mother has given birth to. Here, this lady gave birth to 3 children, and 2 were still living at the time of the birth of this child, Marie Margaret Metz. So maybe there are more children to find the births of here. A lot of the early Buffalo birth records, very early, like 1870s, early 1880s, they did not list the child's name on it necessarily. It would list whether the child was male or female, and it would list the parents' names. But sometimes mixed in with those births, you'll see this document, supplemental report of the given name of child. And so this way you could learn the name of the child. Usually this is directly after the document that has the unnamed child in it. You'll see the parents' names. And what could be helpful for finding some of your female ancestors is usually there was someone who vouched for that person. So maybe George here, this George Backus, this is for him. Maybe he needed proof of his birth for some purpose, such as getting a Social Security card. And he had his sister vouch for him. So we've got his sister's name, Hazel Backus Gould, and it lists where she lived at this time. So if you didn't know where she went to or didn't know her married name, then you've got that here. There's something called delayed birth certificates. New York State, it wasn't considered, birth records aren't considered complete or the laws, fully complied with for keeping birth records until 1913. So if someone's birth was not recorded, you might find a delayed birth certificate for them. We have these at the library. There's several reels of microfilm that cover people who were born from 1864 through 1913. And the reason why someone would have wanted to get a delayed birth certificate was likely to get Social Security. Social Security started in 1936, and also possibly to join the military. So in these records, so you might find one for your female ancestor, or you might find one for a male relative that lists a family member who vouched for them. This is another document where someone vouched for them. So this is for a gentleman, Walter McConnell, and his sister, Jeanette Chester, vouched for him. So we've got her married name. It states her relationship as a sister, and it gives her current address here. Something that's interesting is toward the top, there's these boxes that said what kind of proof was given for this birth. Oftentimes it's a baptismal record. It may actually name the church, so then you would know where someone was baptized. And I just think it's fun that library record is one of the choices there. Being a librarian, I think that's pretty funny that they could use their library record as proof. Cemetery plots. So I don't know if any of you visit cemeteries often, but sometimes you go to a plot and you're like, who is that person buried in my ancestor's plot? I don't know who that person is. Well, if you get the cemetery plot register, it'll tell who those people are. It'll tell their name, their date of death, and often in the remarks column, you might see their relationship to the person who owned this plot. So here we see a Julia White, and it's listed as widow of owner by former marriage. So she must have been married to George Vining and then got remarried to a White and is buried in her first husband's plot. Or you'll see, if you don't know what happened to someone's daughters, you don't know their married name, you might see listings as, some of these listings here, it says that they're the plot holder's daughter. So then you know the relationship there. The library has Forest Lawn Cemetery plot registers. We have Holy Cross and several others on microfilm. Look at their gravestones too, because often gravestones will list a maiden name on them. So to the left, we see a Eunice Bouton Fancher who died in 1778, and Bouton is her maiden name. And then a Callista Livermore Fancher who died in 1908, and Livermore is her maiden name. Look for deeds. If you look for the deeds of someone's husband, oftentimes land was passed between in-laws to a husband. So in this example, this is one of my relatives, Stephen Hoffman, and Martin Myers is his father-in-law. So there we've got a maiden name. So look into those people who sold land or bought land from your ancestor's husband. Look at witnesses to records. So this is my ancestor Agnes Yaziak, and one of the witnesses, this is really a godparent to one of their children, this is a baptismal record, is listed Julia Nowicki, and when I looked into her, it turns out that's her sister, that's Agnes's sister Julia. And this is another example from my Stephen Hoffman. One of the witnesses to his naturalization is William Myers, and that's his brother-in-law. So look at those witnesses and see if you can find a connection. Naturalization records, women could be naturalized. This is for a Sadie Basowitz, and it from 1906 to the present, these documents are very detailed. It lists where she was born in Russia, a specific town, and her date of birth. It lists her husband's name and where he was from in Russia. It lists all of their children's name and then where they were born. And 2 of their daughters were born in Russia. So it lists that, and it lists their birth dates. A little history about naturalization in women from 1855 through 1922 for women and minor children, meaning under the age of 21, became naturalized through the male head of family, so their father or their spouse. And they would just become automatically naturalized. They may or may not be listed on naturalization records, especially those before 1906. From late 1922 to the present, alien minor children became naturalized through their parents. And after late September 1922, alien women had to naturalize themselves. There was a little unfairness to women. Beginning in 1907 and into 1922, women who were American citizens actually lost their citizenship if they married an alien. This was from the Expatriation Act of 1907. If she married an alien, she took the nationality of her husband. So if he was Polish, she was Polish. Women became naturalized if her husband was naturalized. From 1922 into 1931, an American citizen still lost her citizenship if she married an alien who was not eligible to be naturalized. This was primarily Asian men. So if a woman married an Asian man, she would still lose her citizenship, but those who married other nationalities would not lose their citizenship. And a woman was not eligible to become naturalized if her husband wasn't eligible to be naturalized. There was actually in 2014, Congress apologized to women for doing this to them. The good thing for us is that there could be naturalization records for women who were born in the United States and lost their citizenship because they married an alien. So in this example, we see a Florence Lou Wong. It lists her birthplace as New York City, but it lists her nationality as China, and it lists her husband here and where he was born in China. And the way you can tell that this is one of those naturalizations for an American woman, obviously she was born in New York City, but this stuff that's X'd off, this is where she came to the US when she immigrated to the US. So this is a clue that this is one of those naturalizations. So maybe you can find a specific place of birth that you didn't have for your female ancestor this way. You can usually find these naturalization records through 1929 at the Erie County Clerk's Office if you have Erie County people, or look to whatever county your ancestor lived in. Beginning in late 1906, hold on just a second. I'm getting a message on my computer. I apologize, my computer became unplugged and it gave me a battery message. Beginning in late 1906, if someone was naturalized at a U.S. district court, then you can obtain those from the National Archives. And there's more detail about this on your handout. Some naturalizations for Erie County are online on Family Search. So there's an index online from 1831 through 1930, so you can find out if your ancestor was naturalized in Erie County. If you're looking for a photo of your ancestor, a good place to check is passports. Both Ancestry and Family Search have passports from 1795 through 1925, so maybe you'll see a picture of your female ancestor. Military records are also great. This is for a man. Sometimes we have to look to men to find women. I have a James Bentley, it says he was born in Delaware County, New York. This is from his Civil War compiled service record. And then over to the right, there's a Civil War muster abstract, and it lists his parents' names, John, so it's John Bentley, and Mary Barrow. So you've got his mother's maiden name there. And what's interesting is I looked these guys up in the census. This is the 1850 census. You can see John Bentley, Maria, which is Mary, and James, their son. And living right next door are a Barrow family, and his mom's maiden name was Barrow. So that's something very similar, and that's something to look into. I looked for the same family in 1855, and we've got the Bentleys there where I'm showing the arrow, and we've got Burrow spelled a little differently. It's that same Burrow family, but it's spelled a little differently. And what's interesting is we saw that James was born in Delaware County, and so was his wife, Mary. It's listed here in the census. And that Hugh Burrow was also born in Delaware County. And there's a couple other people living right next door, women, who were born in Delaware County. So I think those are people to look into as possible siblings to James's mother. Military pensions are great. You want to look for military pension records for a husband, if there's a widow's pension, for the children who might have been in the military, ex-husband, or even a husband's second wife. There are many indexes to various pension records like the War of 1812, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War in Ancestry. And let's see, U.S. Revolutionary pension files, complete files are in Ancestry and Heritage Quest. And then War of 1812 pension files are available for free on a website called Fold 3. They're not complete yet for New York. They've only got through the surname S, but it is an ongoing project. This example I'm showing right here is from the War of 1812. It's the soldier's name is Elias Fancher, and his wife's name is Sophronia Cordelou. It lists the soldier's parents, Elijah and Charlotte. So we've got his mother's name. It lists the widow's parents, Isaac, Bassett, and Sarah. So we've got Sophronia's maiden name, Bassett. So Cordelou was the name she got married under. So that was another marriage for her before she married Elias Fancher. And this gives information about the date of the marriage and the place of the marriage. And then another document in this widow's pension file states that she was married to William Cordelou, so that was a previous husband, in May of 1947, and that he died at Sheboygan, Wisconsin in 1854, and that the soldier, so this is Elias Fancher, her deceased husband, was married to a former wife named Sally Warden, who died in La Maritime in November 1860 in Wisconsin. So there we've learned information about a previous wife. It was very important for pension files to clear up information about marriages. They needed to make sure that the marriage was legal. So we had to make sure that the other wife was deceased instead of them just separating and marrying another person. This is another example from a pension file. Saratoga County, Hannah Hamlin testified. She's from the town of Moreau, and it says she's 77 years of age on the 4th day of March last, that Martha Munson, who was applying for a widow's pension, was from Portland in Chautauqua County, and that Martha is about 4 years and 6 months older than the deponent, and that Martha was married to Samuel Munson at her father's house in the town of Bristol in the county of Hartford and the state of Connecticut by the Reverend William Robinson of the town of Southington in Connecticut. So this is, you'll see affidavits of witnesses to different vital events. So this woman is, Martha Munson is proving her marriage to her husband Samuel, who was a Revolutionary War soldier. So you've got an affidavit from her sister here about that. And you've learned a lot of personal information. Sometimes you'll see this is this is Elizabeth Bentley, and she was married to James Bentley, who was in the Civil War. It lists her birth date and her marriage date and where she got married to him. Unfortunately, she didn't get a pension because they weren't legally married. James married another woman, and they separated and never divorced. And even though Elizabeth and James were married by a justice of peace, that wedding was not legal because he was never divorced. So she didn't get the pension file, but you've learned a lot of personal detail here. And it names his first wife, Mrs. Mary McCarty. Bible records you might find in those pension files. because they had to prove if a child was trying to get a file, if the father died and was a soldier, they would have to prove their birth, or the wife would have to prove a marriage. So sometimes you'll see Bible records ripped out and put in these files. Bible records are also great for finding information about women. We have the collection of the Western New York Genealogical Society at the library, and they have transcribed some Bible records that they have photocopies of, and you could get a photocopy of something if you find it here for a small fee from the society. The Daughters of the American Revolution website has some Bible records transcribed. You could search for somebody's name, and if you find an entry of interest, then you could get a copy for a fee. Another place to find someone that might have kept Bible records pertaining to your family is using a free website, worldcat.org. And I recommend searching for Bible records and then either a state, so like New York Bible records, or Bible records and the surname you're looking for. So I did a search for Bible records and root family and came up with hits. So maybe those records pertain to your ancestors, and you could contact the library or archive that holds those records, and this database will tell the library's name. Freedman's Bank records are great for African American research. This was a bank set up after the Civil War and to help freed persons and African American soldiers. And they would have to fill out very detailed applications to join the bank. So it would list where they were born, where they were brought up, their age, family member names, so parents, husband, children, siblings. And look around the page. These are usually multiple entries around the page. Sometimes you'll see relatives who went to apply at the same time. This is actually a mother and her daughter applying right next to each other. These also might list the slaveholder name. There's Freedmen's Bureau records, so for freed persons after the Civil War. One type of record are ration records, so if someone needed assistance, they could apply for rations, and actually white people would apply for this too, if they were in hardship after the war. And sometimes you might see details of their lives. You'll see their name, their residence, and there will be remarks. Like, for example, this first lady, it says she's a widow with 3 children. Another one said husband deserted her. So these are, details of their lives. This is a register of freedmen. These are similar to census records. You'll see a person, their gender, their age, their color, their occupation, and these actually list the former slaveholder's name. So you have linked this person to a slaveholder and their former residence when they were enslaved. These records are in Family Search. I apologize. Here is a freedman's contract. So these were usually labor contracts between freed persons, and oftentimes these might end up being the former slaveholder that they're working for. And this one lists a Wiley Lee, and it lists 2 of his daughters that are going to work for this person too, Laura and Martha. So you've got a connection from a father to their daughters. These are in Family Search. You can keyword search them. Of course, there are family and local history books. You can look for family histories of your surname, and you might find pictures of your relatives and all sorts of details of their lives. Look for family reunion publications too, because these will often list people who attended the reunion, and maybe you've lost a female ancestor. You don't know what became of her, but they'll be listed here. For example, there's a Miss Ella Balk Simpson in East Milton and a Miss Lillian Balk Mason of Newton Center, Massachusetts. So this is the Balk family, and you've learned the married name here and where these people live. There are lots of family histories in Heritage Quest and also on Family Search for free. Look at family trees too. Sometimes information in family trees are wrong, but look in them and see if you can prove what people have put in their trees. There are lots of family trees in Ancestry and also on Family Search, and there's a website called RootsWeb. There's all kinds of family tree websites on the internet. So there's Heritage Quest. There's about 28,000 local family histories in there. Let's see here. Look for alumni publications. We've got a couple for Buffalo, for female schools. This is for the Buffalo Female Academy from 1851 through 1876, their 25th anniversary. And it lists all of the different graduates year by year, and it tells their husband's name. And if they passed away, it gives that, and it gives their residence. And then this is the seminaria. And this goes back to the 1860s. It lists all of the graduates from the 1860s up until 1905. And you'll see lots of details about the graduates' lives, including sometimes their children's names, their husband's name, where they live, if they're working, their occupation. Look for lineage society applications. So like if you wanted to join an organization like the Daughters of the American Revolution or the Sons of the American Revolution, look for those applications because they will give detail from the person applying all the way back until the Revolutionary War soldier, generations by generation. It will list the couple, the ancestral couple, when they were born, when they were died. It'll list the wife's maiden name. It'll list military information of the soldier. These Sons of the American Revolution applications are in Ancestry. The Daughters of the American Revolution website, you can go on there for free and search for people's names. And then you can download people's applications for a fee if you wanted to. One of the things often listed on these applications are children of the Revolutionary War ancestor, their dates of birth, and their spouse's name. Of course, remember religious records. We all know about church records, baptisms and marriages and deaths. But one thing I wanted to point out is sometimes we forget that adults might have been baptized, not just children. And this, for this example, is for a Julia Root, and it gives her where she was born in Rochester, and it gives her parents' names, the Armsteads. So that's really helpful. Look for court records. This is an example from Family Search, early Chancery court records. You know, if something like property was involved, you might see a husband and it may list the wife's first name in them. I often like to go to county clerk's offices and start poking through any indexes I can find there and see if there's any sort of civil court records there. You never know what you might learn. There's something called court reporters, that these are judicial opinions about different court cases. These were published, and sometimes you can find these that'll mention your ancestor. This was pertaining to a case of bigamy, and it lists this gentleman who was accused of bigamy. It lists multiple wives, and when he was granted divorces from these people, he was supposed to wait a certain time before getting married again, and he didn't wait that time period, so he was charged with bigamy. But it lists all of these marriage dates and divorce information in this. You can find these in a database we have available at every one of our libraries called Hein Online. There's lots of New York State content, and I recommend just keyword searching for your ancestor's name and you might find something. Look for letters, diaries, scrapbooks. So look at libraries and archives, like this is from the Historical Society, and see if you can find something pertaining to your ancestor or someone who lived in the same town and same time frame. You never know what people might have talked about in their letters, if they could have mentioned your ancestor. The library in our digital collections has a couple of women's diaries scanned online for free. So it could be just interesting. Maybe this is a contemporary of your ancestor and you learn what their life might have been like. We have many scrapbooks at the library. One is a local biography set that includes some newspaper clippings about women. Usually it's something important happened in their life, or it might be an obituary. We also have scrapbooks on clubs, which this, you'll find women in here. This is for the Golden Wedding Club, and it lists who these couples are. And we have lots of other scrapbooks by various topics. Look for club publications. We have many different club publications that women might have belonged to. Sometimes they'll have social columns. This is for the Zonta Club, which is a female organization, kind of similar to the Rotary Club. And it gives some information here about this lady is visiting her son, and it says where her son lives. Look to women in the community. Again, look for bibliographies on women. This bibliography we have: Women's History Sources, a guide to archives and manuscripts collections in the United States. It's an alphabetical listing by town and then by city and town of different women's correspondence and papers and manuscripts. You never know, you might find something about your ancestor in here. There's a free website called Archive Grid. It's a catalog of archival information. So different archives will be listed in here and their holdings will be detailed. So you could search like for Buffalo women and see what kind of women's collections might be available. It'll tell you what archive you can find those records in. Institutional records, look for things like poorhouse, prison, old folks' homes, orphanages. The library has poorhouse records from 1840s into the 1950s. Erie County poorhouse records. You can look for your female ancestor. A lot of times you might see women who were single and having a child in the poorhouse, or you might see, you know, they're older and they can't support themselves, or, you know, maybe they have some kind of health problem. The poorhouse had medical care. So here we see some women underlined, and it gives their age and occupation and when they came to the poorhouse. And on the other side, it says why they were in the poorhouse. So sometimes it says they're destitute. One of them is destitute and pregnant. One of them is destitute and it says they're simple. So perhaps they had a medical condition. And it says what town they were from. And we have Thomas Indian School reports, annual reports from 1881 through 1942. If you have Native American ancestry, maybe you'll see your ancestor was listed in these. Every year they listed the children in the home and what nationality they were, what tribe they were from. We have Buffalo Central High School registers from 1865 through 1909. They do list both female and male students. You'll see their age and you'll see information about their schooling. One of the things it has is where prepared. So what like grade schools and middle schools they might have gone to, and sometimes you'll see that they were from a different area. So like one person was from Cheektowaga instead of Buffalo. One was from Batavia. These other numbers listed here were the different schools for Buffalo. So like public school number 29 or 36. It may, some of the earlier records list the name of the parent or guardian, so that's helpful. And some of them list the religious denomination. So we can see here P for Protestant, LU for Lutheran, B for Baptist, Quaker. We've got all different religions here. We're almost done. The last thing I'm going to talk about is look for middle or given names. Is there an unusual middle name or an unusual given name of an ancestor? In this example, we have a Carlton Livermore Fancher. And Livermore is pretty unusual. Like, where did they come up with that, right? That's not a normal middle name. And what I ended up finding out is I've got a little genealogy of myself here. So there's me and my mom. And if you go up the family line, eventually we hit a lady named Callista Livermore. And Callista was Carlton's grandmother. Oftentimes you'll see a middle name is the grandmother's surname. This is another example. My aunt, my mom's sister's middle name is Ray, R-A-E. And that goes back a few generations. She was given that name from her great-grandmother, Christina Ray Bentley, who got that middle name from her mother's maiden name, Elizabeth Ray. So you want to look into those unusual names. Collaborate with others. This is another middle name example, but I found out this gentleman I knew was researching the Root family like I was, and he did a search on the internet. The ancestor I was searching for was Aradus Lyman Root. He did a Google search and he came up with this family history, and he found a Colonel James Lyman who had a son, Aradus, who had a daughter named Princess, who married a Mr. Root and removed to the state of New York West. So I looked into this further, and Princess married an Abel root. And actually, you can see someone wrote in the name Abel that was scanned online. And I was able to connect Aratus to Abel in early land records. There's these Western New York land transactions. All of the land in Western New York was owned by the Holland Land Company. They were the first people who sold this land to individuals. This is good for making early connections in Western New York. Oftentimes you'll see people buying property right next to each other. And I found these records are online on New York Heritage. You look through that book that I just showed, this Western New York lands transaction, it'll give you the information you need to find the records in this online collection on New York Heritage. And look, I found Abel and Aratus L. Root buying property together. So I think that Princess is his mother's name and her maiden name is Lyman. So I found a mom this way. That's the last thing that I have to tell you. I think I went a little bit over. I apologize about that. But I'd love to hear any of your questions.
We have several, Rhonda. First of all, I just want to thank you for sharing that knowledge with us. And I can only imagine how long it takes to just put together this presentation. So thank you.
You're welcome. I love doing it.
I can tell it really comes through. The first comment I'm seeing is Social Security, very helpful, but remember that it wasn't enacted until 1935.
Yes. Yes.
I'm seeing a couple comments here. Beautiful penmanship. We have a question or a comment, wow, and that was regarding that notification of a deserted bed back in the papers. Another comment, amazingly antiquated.
Yes.
I'm seeing, would a woman ever be listed on a property deed back then, or are we just solely looking for male relatives?
They would, women were often required, the wife was often required to be listed on the deed too, beginning in the late 1700s. You would see the wife's first name. If a woman was single, she could certainly buy property. If she was married, not until the mid 1800s would she, buy her own property. It would be through her husband, but you'll see the woman's first name listed if you didn't know that in those earlier deeds.
Okay, thank you. Next thing is, Rhonda, do you offer a service to do a person's genealogy family tree, and how much do you charge?
I'm not doing research right now, but you can ask me questions through the library, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. I used to, but I don't anymore.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Would you do this for a person's family immigrated from Europe?
Certainly, some of these records could pertain to an immigrant, especially the naturalizations, the census records. A lot of these records could pertain to that. If you're looking for records in Europe itself, I'm not an expert on European records. Certainly, I have used foreign church records, which are usually very helpful for immigrants, but I'm not as knowledgeable about European records actually in Europe. I'm going to teach a class on Irish records coming up through University Express, so I will have some good stuff for you there for Irish.
Yes, and if I can look super quickly, that is going to be Wednesday, December 9th at 10 a.m., getting started with Irish genealogy records, which actually kind of leads into our next question. Maybe you could answer a little bit now. My grandmother and her family came to USA around 1885 from Dublin. How can I find where they arrived? Also, who came with them? Thank you.
One of the best type of records would be naturalization records, so definitely look into that. Usually it would be, for that time frame, it would often be the male head of household. It depends on when he got naturalized. If it was 1906 or later, then you're great. You're going to learn where they came from in the foreign country. I would say also look in church records, oftentimes, especially if they were Catholic, oftentimes Catholic church records will list if a couple came over and had children here in the US. The baptismal record of the children will often list where they were from in a foreign country. Or if someone came over and got married here, look for the church marriage record, as well as the civil marriage record. Sometimes will list a specific foreign place of birth. You can look at passenger list records. There are passenger list records for that time frame. They're not quite, if they came in the 1890s, those records are more detailed, but you never know. It may list a more, it may list some helpful information to you. So you're gonna, obviously you'll find when they came to the US. But as far as where they were born, it probably wouldn't list that information in the 1880s. Okay, but those are the main things. Yeah.
Perfect. We do have quite a few more questions here, Rhonda. Is it okay if we go on? I just want to be mindful of your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Next thing I'm seeing is my mother was born out of wedlock. Her birth certificate is sealed. We have obtained it and it's marked illegitimate. How do I find that in the records because I've been told it's sealed?
I've not. So are you trying to find who the parents are and it's not telling? Or was she sure. The only thing I can think of in terms of sealed records, what comes to mind is adoption records. If the person was adopted, that's the only thing I can think of. Adoption records are now open in New York State if you're a direct line descendant. If the adoptee is living, they can order a copy of their original birth certificate, which would list the parents. If the adoptee is deceased, a direct line descendant, so if it's your mom or your grandma, you can obtain a copy of the original certificate for a fee. I don't know why a birth record would be sealed other than that. Unless it was someone that was born recently. You can't get recent records unless it's your record.
Okay, thank you, Rhonda. Next question is, how will we get the handout? Very interested. Once I get that from Rhonda, if I haven't missed it already, I will email that out to everybody. And for the folks who are calling in, if you want to give me a call at 858-7605, I'll be happy to put that in the mail for you so you can get that. Okay, we have a comment. Rhonda, you are amazing. Your mind is like a computer. Great presentation. Thank you so much. What a lot of work.
Thank you. I love genealogy, in case you can't tell.
I have very thorough, well presented. Excellent job, Rhonda.
Thank you.
And a couple
that means
more
a lot.
Questions.
Those comments mean a lot to me. I really appreciate them.
Oh, we're just so grateful for you doing this and taking the time for us.
Absolutely.
Question. Researching my wife's line, I found a record of the last case tried in Erie County for alienation of affection. That is an interesting topic in itself.
Interesting.
Yeah. Are there thoughts on that, or can I go on?
Yeah, I don't know. What did it say? What kind of record it was? Alienation of?
Nope. Just as I found record of the last case tried in Erie County for alienation of affection.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I can't add any more on that.
Okay. Okay. So we have. I'm researching a Quaker woman named Anna Thomas Jeans. What options do I have for searching here in Buffalo? Really geared to where physically may I go to search?
We do have some Quaker records here at the library on our website, and I'll make sure that this is included on the handout. We have a listing on our website. We have many guides on the library's Grosvenor Room website. And we have a listing of all of the church records that we have and the dates and what type of like birth, marriage record, death records that we have. And there are some Quaker records listed there. So I know we have some on microfilm, and I think there are some published books pertaining to New York Quaker records too that we have in our collection. So I would recommend looking at that guide and seeing if it's the right area. And I know the guide lists a website that you can go to find out where other Quaker records are kept. So, and we do have a book on researching Quakers in the Grosvenor Room too. So I'll make sure that I get Katie a link to that church record guide too.
Perfect. Thank you, Rhonda. And a follow-up to that question is, by the way, great information with several other suggestions for places I might look.
Good.
And we're wrapping it up here. Do death certificates typically list parents? Discuss Buffalo versus New York State records.
Death certificates do usually list parents. It all depends on the informant. So someone is giving that information to the registrar. So, you know, if it's a close relative, they're likely going to know that information. Parents would be listed. Parents' place of birth will be listed if the informant knew that information. The informant would be named. Usually the relationship isn't told, but the informant would be named. So if it's something like a child or a spouse, oftentimes they know that information, but sometimes you get a death certificate back and you're disappointed because whoever gave the information didn't know that information. And in terms of Buffalo versus New York State, sometimes Buffalo kept records longer than the rest of the state. For example, there are deaths that go back. New York State deaths start in 1880, and Buffalo's go back into the 1850s. I want to say 1852, but I'm not positive. And Buffalo is a little different. There are certain cities that are not listed in the New York State Vital Records Index until a later date. So Buffalo, Albany, and Yonkers are not in the New York State Vital Records Index for marriage or for births and deaths until 1913, and they're not in the marriage index until 1908. So you have to go directly to those cities to find the indexes for those earlier time frames. New York City is also not in the New York State Vital Records Index at all. There are separate indexes for New York City. The records, I would say, are usually very similar in terms of what information is recorded, though.
Okay, thank you, Rhonda. Next comment, truly enjoyed this presentation. What an amazing skill set you have. I can't wait to come to the library and use some of the resources.
Yay, come visit us. We like visitors. We like helping people.
And actually a question that I'll add on to that, do people have to make an appointment to view all of the documents, or are they just able to come in?
They can just come in. The Grosvenor Room is open the same hours as the rest of the Central Library. The only thing you would ever have to make an appointment for is a rare book. Right now, because of COVID, because when you view a rare book, you sit in this little room with someone kind of close to you. We're not doing appointments for rare books. Sometimes we can show something briefly to you, depending on what it is. If you just needed to look at something quickly, we might be able to bring it out for you. But right now, we're not taking appointments for rare books. But the other stuff, you can come in anytime. You don't need to make an appointment. There's always staff on duty who can help you.
Okay, thank you, Rhonda. And just a couple more things here, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Are out-of-state records shared through our Erie County Library?
We don't have many records like on microfilm pertaining to other areas. Through our databases is usually where we get those records. So there are a lot of out-of-state records like in Ancestry or on Family Search. We do have many histories and transcribed records for other areas. So like county histories and family histories for other areas in our what's called our Grosvenor collection. And sometimes genealogy societies will transcribe records and publish them. We do have some of those for out of state. We focus more on New England area, like East Coast, but we do have records and histories for other locations across the country too.
Okay, thank you. Next question, how would I get Buffalo Quaker meeting records digitized?
I don't know. There could be some things on Family Search too. I could, that's something to look into. In terms of getting things digitized, there would have to be permissions from whatever Quaker, whatever church that was, and whatever repository holds those records. It's possible a project could be done. So you could start with probably contacting whoever might be in charge of those records, like what Quaker group might be in charge of those records, to get their permissions. And if it was something the library held, we don't do tons of digital projects, but you never know what we might do.
Thank you. And the last thing I'm seeing here is thank you, Rhonda and Catherine. I really appreciate the opportunity to attend this presentation. The focus on women is much appreciated.
Yes.
Okay. Well, again, Rhonda, thank you for your time, for your research, for what you do. And everyone who's on still, thank you for being here with us today. And I will send you the information when I have a chance. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.
Thank you very much.
All right. Bye. Bye, everyone.